So this is the mask that we are going to be sewing. It's accordion surgical style. Has a fabric in front and a lining or solid color fabric in the back so that it's easy to tell which is the right side and which is the wrong side. It has an opening right here to place a filter, and it has space to put an optional channel for a twist tie or whatever metal you want to put in there, so that if you do want to add that for a contoured nose fit, you can do that too. And it has tape, fabric tape ties. I'm not going to call it bias tape because I cut it on the straight grain, not on the bias. There's no need for bias tape in this application. And it just goes right over the edge. And I do not press or prepare that bias tape ahead of time. I just rip it and apply it while sewing. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make this mask. So step one is cutting your fabric. Because of the style of mask, where you can see the front fabric kind of folds over to give you that nice little opening in the back, that means the front fabric is going to be larger than the back fabric. So I've cut the front fabric 8 inches by 9 inches, and the back fabric, I have it 6.5 by 9 inches. And that gives me enough space to do a nice 1/2 inch seam allowance right up here so that I can go ahead and top stitch it down nicely. My favorite way of cutting fabrics, if I have a nice large piece of yardage, like I usually do for the lining fabrics, is to just make a snip so for this lining fabric, it would be every 6.5 inches. I would snip, 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 and then tear the fabric. And it's going to tear nice and straight on the grain line. And then I'll be able to go ahead and every 9 inches, just make a nice cut with my rotary cutter. I like to stack them and just bang out a bunch of pieces that way. Strips, I've been cutting them every 1.5 inches. I did 2 inches at first, and I thought that the 1/2 inch strips were too thick. I wasn't a fan. So now I'm doing 1.5 inches. And as you can see, I already snipped, and it's so satisfying to just tear them. They come out exactly 1.5 inches. You don't have to worry about fiddly cutting these things. No, just rip it, have fun, have your kids rip them. My 3-year-old actually can rip these. He enjoys it. But there you go. Have a pile. You do get little strings, that you can clip away later. But I have my pile of them in the back for when we get to bind the sides and finish it up. So let's get to sewing. So as you can see, ahead of time, I serged the ends, just one end of these fabrics. And this is going to be the end that has the opening. So go ahead, put it in here. And for this edge, I like to have about a 1/2 inch of seam allowance. I hold these starting off so that it doesn't get sucked in like it sometimes does. Back stitch, go forward about 1 inch, back stitch, needle up, all the way to the end, about 1 inch from the edge, forward, back stitch, forward, back stitch, and then up. And then here in production sewing, you would just keep going and putting the next one again and again and again. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to pretend that I don't have a serger. So I'm just putting it together without serged ends, and I'll show you how I'll finish this one later when I'm making the channel or the insert. So as you can see, I am actually sewing with a 3-year-old in the background. Some of you may have more ideal setups. I'm here in the corner of a toy room. a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. Back stitch, forward, back stitch. And so just pretend I did like 20 of these in a row, right? That's what I do. There's no need to cut the thread. You just leave the thread right there, and it really does save on the thread that you use in the bobbin and up top. So again, pretend I did like a million of these. And while you're cutting that, might as well cut the middles of these. So for the serged ends, all you need to do is open this up and press it. I do recommend that you press it, because for the serged end, you don't need to stitch or anything else. I have a mask right here that went through the wash and everything, and this is what it looks like still going through the wash. You can see, actually, it's kind of cool because I was able to catch that up there without even meaning to in the top stitching. So it prevented it from flipping out. But even this one that's not caught didn't flip out. So I think this is maybe the one time where I would recommend pressing it. If you don't have easy access to a pressing station, then you can just go all around with a straight stitch and stitch it. I'm going to show you. I have a pressing board. Okay, so you've pressed right here, the opening. Go ahead and wrong sides together. Fold it so that the edges meet and press the top.
Okay.
Now, usually we would sew this wrong sides together, then flip right side out and top stitch it. But to save time, I'm just going to fold these in 1/4 inch, put the needle down so that it's secured, back tack a little, and then I'm going to pull on this nice and taut so that it keeps the seam allowance of 1/4 inch. Do the same thing. I'm just pulling on it, and it's, you know, it's there, caught by the needle, under the presser foot, and go ahead and stitch. Leave it there. Do the same thing again. And once you have it stitched partly way, it gets a lot easier. And again, if I'm making 10 or 20 of these masks at a time, I would do this step in a chain stitching kind of way. Just boom, 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 boom. Going through and doing that. Actually, sorry, I shouldn't have even come up. Usually I just pivot the needle, go around one of the sides, all the way up here, and then I'll do one more, and then edge stitch top. I'm going about 1/8 of an inch from the top. And just so it's easier to do the pleats, I pivot and go ahead and base the side. If you're comfortable doing the pleats without this step, then please do so, because it'll just save you a little bit extra time. Clip. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the pleats. So you can see the opening is there, and it's not top stitched, but it's serged. And in my test where I went ahead and washed it, it came out pretty well. So I'm doing a lot this way. So this is about 1.5 inches, and that's what you want. 1.5 inches from the top is going. You're going to do your first pleat going down, and it's going to be about just a little under a half inch.
Don't do that.
Okay. Yeah, my children are in here. Like I said, it's the playroom. They have problems sharing. Okay, so this is caught under. Okay, so now we're going to do our next 1/2 inch pleat. I'm going to turn it sideways so you can kind of see. Butt it up against it, and it's about 1/2 inch right there. Just put it down. Go ahead, sew it. So when that's caught, you're going to do your last pleat, 1/2 inch, until it goes right there. It's hard to do sideways. I'm used to just doing it by feel. And there. And then you'll have about 1/2 inch left at the bottom. Don't even worry about back stitching because this is all going to be caught up in the binding. So I like to do it from the top, which means that for this side, I'm starting at the bottom about 1/2 inch down, pinching that, then bringing it up 1/2 inch so that there's 1/2 inch at the bottom, and the pleat is like 1/2 inch. Okay. If you do the math, it's like 3 layers of 1/2 inches, so it ends up being like 1.5 inches, you know, of fabric kind of taken up into like 1/2 inch, if that made sense. So again, just butting it up, and boom, boom. And you see I'm doing these backwards where they're, where the first time I was doing them facing towards me, now they're facing away from me, because we want the pleats to be facing down. When you're done, both pleats on both sides are going to be facing down from the top. And that's really important based on feedback that we've gotten about pleats that are facing up like this, I guess, can catch more stuff. I don't know. We've been told just to face them down from the top. So when there's an opening, you have to kind of keep that in mind because there is a top and a bottom on this style. Okay, so now it's time to put the binding on the edge. And I have some like loosely woven broadcloth that's 100% cotton, but it was not suitable for the face mac portion, but it's perfect for the binding portion. So what I do is it's about 42 inches, like selvage to selvage, end to end, which is great because then you don't have to worry about these fraying. You can just fold them and sew them without tucking the ends in. So go ahead and mark the center of the strip, and on the top of the edge, put the center right here, starting at this edge, so that this top strap is just going to be a little bit longer than the bottom strap, and that works out because you need a little bit more to tie at the top than on the bottom, because, you know, our head is bigger on the top than around our neck where the bottom strap is going to be. So go ahead, and I usually just line it up with the edge of my presser foot. You can see I have this springy presser foot because it goes over the pleats really well. That's what that spring does. It helps the presser foot sew over like uneven like gathers, you know, just over bumps. So it's 1.5 inches, so you're going to want to be 3/8 of an inch. So go forward, and again, this is just tacking it. You don't have to go and back tack. You can just think of this as a basting stitch. That's actually way too close. Okay, so now I have that here. You can see that I'm going to turn it over like this and like this, and that's how it's going to bind that edge. So if you want to, you can go ahead and clip it. I honestly usually don't, but it does help the first couple times that you do this. So again, I did not press this. I'm not doing anything of the sort. I like to sew from the top edge so that I can just see and it just looks nicer. So go ahead and up here, fold in 3/8 of an inch on one side, in 3/8 of an inch on the other side, fold it in half. Make sure that it's going the same way as this. Okay, so that's going to be like that. Go in, and here you will want to back tack. Forward a little bit, backwards, forward more, and the secret to not pressing at all is just having it in there and then pulling on it, because it's ripped on straight of grain. It's going to naturally just fold straight. started. All you have to do is keep pulling on it and just eyeballing out. Do it up here so you can see. I do it all the way down there, eyeballing it, going like that, pressing it. And you can do it all the way back here. Fold it, fold it, fold it, kind of. There we go. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. I have a 3-year-old flipping out. Usually I sew at night, but the light is better during the day. So I'm sewing with my chaos all around me. So you can see I'm getting close to the binding part. Oh, not close to the edge there. All right. And so here I'm going to want to stitch carefully. Make sure that the back is good. It is. Take that out. And back stitch, over back stitch. I back stitch a bunch of times because right here at the end is where there's going to be a lot of tension on the fabric. And you can see the only thing is these strips are going to have a tendency to have all these little threads. So do the same thing down here. Back tag. And keep going. It saves a lot of time when you don't have to press binding strips. Keep going, keep going. Do, do, do. I don't know why this hasn't turned off yet. Okay, so here's a mask if you don't have a serger on this step. Since the seam allowance was a 1/2 inch, that's generous enough that what you can do is you can fold it over and tack it down, just top stitch it down. And it's kind of annoying to do, but I tested out a couple other ways of doing it that I didn't like it. Right? I tested one where just I don't fold it under. This is what it looked like after washing. This is after I clipped off some threads, you know? So there was just like threads coming out of the mask. And I just didn't think it would, you know, like probably nurses and stuff, healthcare people aren't going to have time to just go ahead and be like, oh, it's not a big deal. Just unclip, you know, clip these little threads coming out. Now it's going to tickle their nose. So I wasn't happy with that. Another test that I did was just zigzagging the raw edges. This one was a little better, but unless you get the very edge of it, see, like when I zigzagged it, I kind of just did the middle. I didn't catch the edge. So I had the same problem where, again, I should have left these unclipped, but all this stuff was coming out. And I think that's a problem. So you could just fold it and just make sure to zigzag right on that edge, or you can just straight stitch and kind of fold it under as you do it. That way you know that people aren't going to have issues noises from little threads getting in there. So it's just, you don't need that. This part doesn't matter so much because it's not the opening, it's on the inside of the mask. So just pivot. Now here, go ahead and pull it taut, just like you did before, and pull it taut, and it will kind of turn on its own. Don't want it to be, you don't want it to sew down much more than the seam allowance, because then it will gap open. You don't want that either. We want it to just kind of be closed in there. So there we go. And back this a little just because. All right, so then now this is going to be the opening if you don't have a serger, and it looks really nice and professional. I do think, honestly, I do think it's worth taking the extra time to do that, because some of these facilities are going to be washing them a lot, and we don't want the mask to break. Sorry, my throat is dry from all this talking, so I'm having to reshoot scenes because I've made like probably 5 masks shooting this video. My children are wild. So I didn't even explain what I did, sorry. I the same as before, I folded it up here, and I just folded it so that the raw edges down here meet. Okay. And then I'm folding these under 1/4 of an inch, and just the same way, pulling taut so that they stay straight. And again, this saves me having to sew it, turn it inside out, and then press it. If we can skip pressing, even though I have a pressing station right behind me, but if we can skip pressing, all the better. All the better. And pivot. Go ahead and stitch up the side. It's one of these things, it's not totally necessary, but it definitely makes the pleats easier. All right, go ahead and smooth it, smooth it. Up there. All right, downside.